His cat had been missing for almost 3 days. He was so worried he hardly slept at night. His cat was so precious to him that he could not bear the thought of not being able to see his beloved pet anymore. Then, one morning, his cat finally came home. But there was something different with his pet. Around his cat's neck was a very strange-looking collar. He had never seen it. He took a closer look and immediately called the cops. James had been taking care of his cat, Minky, for more than 3 years now. Minky loved to play under the sun. When James keeps him cooped up indoors the whole day, you can expect Minky to throw a tantrum by meowing a lot by the door. If you do not pay him attention, the cat will start damaging things. James learned that it was best to let Minky out of the house. The cat seemed to always find his way home at the end of the day, around dinner time. One day, dinner time came and went, and there was no sign of Minky. James started to get worried. He spent all night waiting for Minky to return, but his beloved cat did not show up at all. This was the first time it happened. James was worried sick. What if something happened to Minky out in the streets? That night, James found it hard to sleep. He started thinking of all the places where Minky would wander off. He could not bear the thought of not seeing his beloved pet again. The following day, Minky still has not come home. So, James started by calling local shelters to see if anybody had dropped off a cat since yesterday. James left them a good description of Minky and asked them to give him a call if he showed up. James also made some posters and hung them up around the neighborhood. Minky was a familiar cat in the neighborhood. Most people saw the cat at least once a day. They all got his number and promised to call right away if they saw Minky. But despite these efforts, it did not get James closer to finding his missing pet. 2 days had passed, and still there was no sign of Minky. He was starting to think that something terrible had happened to his cat, and he could not bear the thought of it. You see, Minky is James's constant companion. James had no family left. He never got married, and he never had kids. Minky was the closest thing to family he had. The thought of losing his beloved pet would be devastating in his situation. The following day, James woke up to the sound of loud meowing from downstairs. He rubbed his eyes. Could it be? Is Minky back? Or was he just hearing things? After hearing another loud meow, James quickly jumped out of bed. James did not even bother to get dressed. He was so excited to see Minky again. He had missed his beloved pet cat so much. James could feel his heart racing as he rushed down the stairs. He tried to determine where Minky was in the house. And sure enough, there was Minky in his kitchen. James dropped to his knees and cried out in excitement and pure joy. Minky immediately went to him, and James spoiled him with rubs and pats. He could not believe his own eyes. It was a miracle for him. When James picked Minky up for a hug, he felt something different. There was something hard in Minky's body. James took a closer look at his cat and noticed something that was never there before. Minky had a weird-looking collar around his neck. James was not even sure if it was a collar. He tried to take the strange-looking collar off, but Minky clearly did not want him to. When James would try to touch the collar, Mr. Minky would bite his hand, something he never did before. James was so shocked that Minky bit him for the first time that he unconsciously dropped the cat from his arms. Luckily, Minky landed on his feet. James started to worry. What was that weird-looking collar, and why was Minky acting so strange? James had a lot of questions in his mind, but then he decided to set them aside for now. The important thing was that Minky was back. James prepared a big bowl of Minky's favorite canned food. His cat devoured everything right away. Had Minky been starving for the past few days when he was missing? This made James worry. James decided to close up all the cat's exits in his house for now. He knew that Minky would not like it, but he did not want to risk losing his pet again. But James knew he had to get to the bottom of this. He waited for Minky to fall asleep once more, and when Minky dozed off, James tried to get a closer look. But this time, he did not make any attempts to touch it. But he still could not make any certain conclusions. James tried to think of ways to inspect the device around Minky's neck without waiting for the cat to fall asleep. When he looked up, Minky was in the middle of a deep sleep once more. Unable to resist, James tried to get a closer look again. This time, he tried to reach out to get the device again, but Minky beat him to it once more. The cat was able to sense James getting near and woke up. Minky was very angry and reacted aggressively. It was as if he did not want James to touch the strange device. James decided the only way he would be able to get the strange white collar around Minky's neck would be to make sure that the cat stayed asleep. James found a sleeping pill that would not hurt his cat and gave him one by mixing it in his food. James waited for Minky to fall asleep after eating. Then he realized a red light flashed from the strange-looking collar. James was taken aback. This was disturbing. What could this device be, and what is it used for? James used to be curious about the device, but now that he knew the device was flashing, he started to become nervous. What if the device was dangerous? As a responsible pet owner, he had to get it out of Minky's neck right away. James took a closer look and noticed that the chunky part of the collar looked like a camera. There was a black dot close to where the red flash came from. As he moved closer, there was another red flash. This time, James is more determined to remove the device. Maybe it had a marking or a serial number that would help him solve the mystery. But there was one problem. There was no buckle or snap on the device. He tried cutting it with the kitchen scissors, but the band was too thick. He had to use a stronger tool. James took out his toolbox and found a pair of nippers. They were not that sharp, but it looked like they could do the work on the band. And his hunch was correct. The device fell off on just the first try. James turned the collar around. When James put it up to the light, he noticed that there was a small button. He gave the button a push and held his breath as he waited for something to happen. The device beat in response. Then a computerized voice said, "Upload complete." James was shocked. Was the device connected to something over the internet? What was being uploaded? James felt frustrated. It seemed like after solving a puzzle, he just ended up with another one. What kind of data was the collar collecting? Was it a spying device? James did not want to take any risks. He grabbed a hammer from the toolbox. It was time to find out what it was made of and how it ended up in Minky's neck. James set the device on the table and smashed it with the hammer until the casing pulled apart. The device nearly exploded and tiny pieces flew out. When he was done, he could get a good view of what was inside. The first thing James noticed was the camera. This he already expected. Then he found a microphone and an antenna. He wanted to tell someone, but is this something that the police would take seriously? After giving it much thought, James ended up calling the police just in case he was in danger. After all, it looked like the device was being used for spying. After James explained everything about the strange device that was recording and sending data, the police officer promised they would send someone to his house right away. James had expected them to be skeptical about it, but the cops did not doubt him for a second. It only took a few minutes for the police to come knocking at his door. It was obvious that they took this seriously. They never questioned him. Have there been similar cases? Could this be just part of some bigger plot? James let the cops in and showed them the broken pieces of the white collar. The cops then told him that they had received several reports about the white collars on cats, but every time they investigated, the collars were gone. James was shocked that other pet owners were going through the same thing that he had, although it had been confirmed that this had nothing to do with him personally. This news did not make him feel any better. The cops took what was left of the collar. They said they would keep in touch if they had any additional information. That night, James received a phone call. It was an unknown number. Could it be the people behind the mysterious white collar? He answered the call. It turned out to be the police station giving an update. They analyzed the device and were able to track down the person who owned it. When James heard that person's motive, he could not believe it. It was not as terrible as everyone had feared. A local teen turned out to be the one behind the tracking devices. He was just testing them on cats he found in the neighborhood. The teenager was planning to start his own business with his creation someday. James was relieved to know that it was nothing serious, although he'll never get to know where Minky had been in those 3 days that he had been missing. James was glad that Minky was not in danger.